How can credit specialties actually adapt to these while supporting and, I guess, growing global trade?
I think the success that we've seen in periods of crisis has been when we have great leadership from the top.
I'm Deepesh Patel, editor at Trade Finance Global. I'm delighted to be joined today by Angela Duca.
I've been at Marsh for 16 years. I'm the global leader for the credit specialties practice.
Welcome to Trade Finance Talks, your go-to trade, treasury and payments podcast, brought to you by TFG. Today, we're talking about future-proofing trade, building resiliency in our future leaders, and the community role we play within trade finance and supply chains. What does our future workforce need, and how will they navigate the evolving trade and trade credit world? Beyond maximizing shareholder value and impact, what's our social responsibility as large financial institutions, credit insurers and multilaterals? And finally, when the going gets tough, how do we manage systemic risks and support all communities who operate in trade and supply chains? As part of this C-Suite Leadership series, I'm delighted to be joined today by Angela Duca, Global Specialty Head, Credit Specialties at Marsh. We're navigating through what many call a poly-crisis era. The aftermath of global supply chain disruptions continues to reverberate, while geopolitical tensions from Eastern Europe to the Middle East totally reshape trade corridors. Boardroom discussions are changing. Corporate insolvencies across major economies are expected to rise, coupled with persistent inflation. At the same time, we're witnessing a profound shift in how businesses define success. The traditional metrics of profit and loss are being complemented by a growing emphasis on social impact and community development. Given directions at these crossroads poses a complicated leadership challenge. Angela joined Marsh McLennan 16 years ago and leads the credit specialties business at Marsh. She'll be answering the million-dollar question on how best to nurture future talent and drive meaningful social change whilst ensuring organizations stay profitable and relevant. Angela, thank you for coming in and welcome to Trade Finance Talks.
Thank you very much. And I see that I am here to answer the million-dollar question. You mentioned polycrisis. With polycrisis, I'll steal this from one of my leaders in my team. There's poly-opportunities. So I think there's many different ways that we can be thinking about how we, as you mentioned, not only have an impact for the firms that we work for and bring forward our shareholder value, but how do we also maximize the value of our colleagues and our colleague experience and our communities that we work for. Ultimately, we're here and living in a community together. We don't have the one self at work and the one self out of work. I like to encourage my team is how do you have that balanced influence and balanced role in and out of the office?
Thank you. So impact is the key word there. Angela, elevator pitch. Who are you? Where are you from? And what do you do?
Well, thank you. You mentioned I've been at Marsh for 16 years. I'm the global leader for the credit specialties practice. And previous to joining Marsh, I was at another insurance brokerage firm specializing in multinational and specialty insurance. And that's what I really like about credit specialties is I'm able to put those both together from a global trade perspective, global finance, and global investment. So this is the right home for me. Our team is around 900 globally. So I get to see all of our colleagues and meet our key clients. And it's just an invigorating way to think about how do I, with my team, impact real social issues and real trade and investment and finance issues in the world? We're a very transactional business, so what we do matters. And that's what's been really exciting to me as I made that shift 16 years ago from property and casualty and other types of insurance to one that's more transactional and bringing capital to where it's needed the most.
Thank you very much. Wow, 900 people. That's quite a big impact there and footprint. So over the course of those 16 years, Angela, what are the biggest challenges you've observed in credit specialties? So let's focus, particularly on non-payment and guarantees since you joined.
Rather from a challenge perspective, it's really more of an opportunity perspective. I've seen the market change and be very adaptable. I remember probably 15 years ago now when we were working with our clients to use the credit insurance market to help support project finance. And it was an area that was very well capitalized from a banking perspective, but they were looking for insurance to help lever up their positions and be more relevant to their clients and take larger ticket sizes. All the reasons that financial institutions now might use credit insurance, but at the time it wasn't supporting project finance. And so to watch the underwriters and the insurance market adapt, learn, partner with the clients in a deeper way. We also saw that in funds finance and some other areas. So I've seen the credit insurance market take on more sophisticated risks, be in places that are more challenging, have a closer partnership with multilaterals and supporting work that we've done with other agencies from trade, looking at commodities financing, looking at bank-to-bank transactions. So I don't think it's necessarily a challenge. I think it's been an opportunity. We've also seen in another product that we have in credit specialties is surety, moving beyond the traditional of bricks and sticks and bricks and mortars to collateral replacement. So how do we use insurance risk capital and leverage that rather than bank finance risk capital? So I think that's been a change that we've seen in the market and really embedding insurance in a process. Obviously, there's been a lot of changes from a regulatory perspective. There's been a lot of changes from a risk perspective. You mentioned in the introduction that, from a geopolitical, financial perspective, right now we're at a period of time where it just doesn't look like things are going to get a lot better. We've had a lot of churn in 2024 with elections, and the leaders that have been elected are going to be here for the rest of the decade, for the most part, that we would anticipate. So there's still a lot of uncertainty and there's a lot of risk. But I think that the market has shown its ability to be adaptive and adaptable in periods of crisis.
Let's go into a bit more detail as we experience these significant systemic risks, which, as you said, don't seem like they're going to go down, from geopolitical tensions to supply chain disruptions. How can credit specialties actually adapt to these while supporting and, I guess, growing global trade?
I think the success that we've seen in periods of crisis has been when we have great leadership from the top. So when we're thinking about the engagement of the CEOs of various insurance companies, of various financial institutions with other risk providers, risk capital providers, I'll give you one example. When you think about the pandemic, how did we ensure that people that needed access to healthcare, access to vaccines, received that? We worked on a transaction to ensure that lower income countries were able to have access to be able to buy and support the vaccine, being able to give the vaccine to their constituents. But that took work above the transactor level. It was beyond my team and another team. That's one. Another example is from an ESG perspective. We've seen the insurance market across many lines, including in the credit lines, pull back in certain transactions because they felt that they were ESG negative, when in fact the solutions that they were providing, surety is a good example from a reclamation bond perspective, is ESG positive. And that's taken a lot of effort and advocacy from people at Marsh and other places as well, to be speaking with investor relations, to be speaking with the climate and sustainability practices, to have our climate and sustainability practices speaking with others in order to find solutions to complex problems. The first thing that I would say is a much larger issue beyond just those that are in the deals. And having great connections and support from leadership is one of the ways that I think the credit specialties market can continue to adapt and support global challenges. I also think that the market, while we need to be very clear about our mandates and also clear about our need to deliver returns to our shareholders, we also need to think about what's the social impact of what we do. And when environments change, not pulling back capacity as quickly as we do, finding more creative ways of structuring deals, ensuring that we can still be there when the market changes or when there's an opportunity in the market to bring stability. Insurance risk capital has a piece to play in providing stability in geopolitical or macroeconomic times of change.
That's a good point. How do we ensure that the insurance market always provides the capacity? Trade tends to be counter-cyclical versus macroeconomics and geopolitical. Let's go on to the social impact piece that you talked about, because clearly trade credit can have a big role to play in allowing companies to grow and safeguard their profits. But as you said, it's more than just focusing on the bottom line. Angela, in your experience, how important is it to balance profitability with social impact and community? And what role does Marsh play in supporting those communities beyond financial growth?
So our firm defines our key stakeholders as clients, colleagues, communities, and our stakeholders, our shareholders, ourselves. And our CEO is very passionate about ensuring that the initiatives that we have, how he's driving strategy moving forward, that there's an impact for those four key stakeholders. A few months ago, I had the opportunity to meet him in person and spend a little bit of time with him. And he mentioned that at the end of the day, every day, he looks back at his schedule and tries to map out did this meeting or did this conversation, who did it impact? Did it impact our colleagues? Did it impact our clients? Did it impact our communities? Did it impact the firm, our shareholders? And he suggested that be something that I take on myself. I'm working on that. We will see. But having that very thoughtful and intentional approach to social impact in communities, I think, is number one. The second at Marsh is it's very important for us to be out in the communities. So we have a very robust social impact platform where we're encouraging colleagues to volunteer. Every May we have it's Global Volunteer Month where we're all encouraged to take a day off and volunteer. We're given a day, 8 hours to volunteer for whatever activity that we would like. A lot of offices will do things together. We have t-shirts that say Marsh Cares, and it's a great opportunity to have that community as well with your colleagues as you're helping the local community, but that's coming from above and below. So we have this really great intersection of our colleagues that want to be part of the community because, again, we're humans. That's what makes us different from being robots is we feel, we have emotions, we want to connect, and that top-down approach of being very intentional about having that community and social impact.
What was your community experience?
This year, the Charlotte office, so I'm based in Charlotte, North Carolina, the Charlotte office, we went to a home that helps children that have been traumatized through very difficult experiences in their childhood to be in a safe environment. We weren't working with the children directly. We were the landscapers. So we were spreading mulch. We were digging to pull up plants and put new plants in. It was a great opportunity to just be a part of helping to create a space that was safe for the children, helping to create a space that was bringing them joy where they could relax and take a break from what had been some very difficult experiences for them. So that's what we did in the Charlotte office. But we've done other events with other large international organizations that provide disaster relief and helping them put together kits. So there's a lot that I think individually and collectively firms can do to have that social impact.
Thank you. And Angela, I think you've got a story to tell about the importance of community based on your recent trip to South Africa, right?
I did. It was my first time in South Africa, and it was a great opportunity to meet with our clients and to meet with our colleagues. And I was there as part of a risk and resiliency summit that we were hosting that included Marsh and Oliver Wyman and Mercer to be thinking about risk from a 360 perspective. And while we were there, the recent unemployment statistics had been released that week. And what was staggering about the numbers is I think at the time it was 30% of country unemployment and 62 or 63% youth unemployment is being in that environment and understanding that when I'm interacting with a colleague, I'm interacting with someone who's 1 or 2 degrees of separation away from the impacts of not having access to employment, looking for a position and not having that. And also as I've traveled around the world and seeing how we are ensuring that we're bringing the best solutions and the right expertise in local markets, that might mean that we have expats that are within certain offices. But what left me when the unemployment statistics, but also thinking about when we're bringing expats in, how can we help develop the local economy by transferring knowledge, by bringing up the colleagues within that offices? How do we ensure that we don't go into a country, exploit the resources, and then leave? What's our responsibility? And then secondly is how can we be more creative if we know that, for instance, in South Africa and other places where you have rolling blackouts, how are we showing up as a firm to support the colleagues? Are we offering them enough flexibility in getting to the office? Are we offering an opportunity for them, let's say on a Saturday, to come into the office if it's very hot outside, to experience being in a more climate controlled environment? Are we thoughtful about when we're coming up with compensation discussions, what is the impact into the local community? So as I've traveled around and met the team, the intersection of and the interplay of a company in a community and not being there only for the profits, but how can we make the community better while we're there is something that really struck me seeing and interacting with the people.
Hey, enjoying this podcast? Hit that follow button for more. Done? Let's get back to it. Thank you very much. It's important to consider the size and scale of firms like Marsh to actually educate and bring up that next generation. Let's talk about emerging and developing markets, particularly in the context of disaster. How can credit specialties actually help those markets recover, and what role do you think Marsh should play in these efforts? Perhaps you could talk about the role of credit specialties in enabling economic activity in conflict zones and post-conflict.
I think that there's a great opportunity for a number of the credit specialties products and Marsh in general to help countries recover post-disaster, post-conflict. One area of credit specialties we haven't spoken about is parametric insurance. And that's a team that we have. It's smaller of the 900, but still very significant and impactful. Thinking about how can municipalities, how can governments, how can government agencies, how can companies look at putting together disaster recovery programs that include a parametric element to it. So when there's natural catastrophes in particular, how can the claims payment be made very quickly? That's one of the features of the parametric is it's not a loss-based trigger, it's an event-based trigger. For instance, did the wind exceed a certain miles per hour? Did the rainfall, was it above a certain measurable metric or below a certain measurable metric? And so that can be helpful for having certainty of payment and having quick payment. But from an investment perspective, when we think about post-conflict zones, how can credit specialties markets partner with public agencies and other multilaterals, whether it's in country or out of country, to help start investment, to help bring investors back into the country? Obviously, public agencies and multilaterals will talk about crowding in. What is the multiplier effect of them being in a trade or being in an investment? Is it 1 to 4, 1 to 5? So every dollar that they're investing, do they get 4? Do they get 5? Do they get 3? Do they get 6? But that multiplier effect, how can we be more proactive in that? And obviously, trade has an ability to help raise up the local economies from an underwriting perspective, from a broker perspective, from an FI perspective. How can we not shy away from being in post-conflict, post-disaster, take a little bit more risk? Maybe there's additional risk sharing that we can do on the back end, but to try and bring capital into those areas that need it. As I was thinking about the podcast today, I was looking at some statistics, and just even on the unemployment, there's a recent statistic by the World Economic Forum, and in lower income countries, only 1 in 5 young adult workers, and they define young adults between the ages of 20 to 25, are in a regular paid job. So when you think about what can be the positive impact of new manufacturing, new technology, whether the industry, what it could be, helping those get jobs and recover from post-conflict, post-disaster, or being in chronic areas of conflict, how can we turn the story around?
It's super interesting because even at the time of this recording, we're talking about emerging and developing markets, but very close to home, you have Storm Bert wrecking through entire towns and cities in Wales and Pontypridd. And it's interesting you mentioned about the parametric claims and response there. It's super important and has a real impact right now.
You mentioned the storm that's going on here in the UK, coming from North Carolina and being in the southeast portion of the United States. Of course, hurricane season is always very time of nervousness for a lot of companies. And we saw a number of very disastrous experiences this year, and seeing the community pull together. But now is the hard work is homes need to be rebuilt. Businesses need to be rebuilt. Capital needs to flow back into these areas so that business owners can get loans in order to expand their operations. So now's the time to be opening up the tap for capital, and let's collaborate together to figure out the best ways to do that.
I want to shift gears a little bit now and talk about leadership, because organizational leaders, both current and emerging, will really help drive the industry forward. In the years that you've been with Marsh, Angela, how have you seen the skills required for leadership evolve, especially in the credit specialty sector?
I've seen 2 shifts from a Marsh leadership perspective. And I think one has been the leaders coming in now are hyper-focused on collaborating because our company structure is a matrix organization. So in order to achieve your objectives, you do need to collaborate across various teams and various functions. What I'm finding is my peers are very focused on how do we deliver solutions together. So it's not just about how do you introduce your clients to me or how can I introduce my clients to you, but how can we put our 2 teams together to create something new and innovate something new. So I'm seeing collaboration as a very key skill set that is being pressed upon and growing in the firm. That innovation. So how can we think about bringing insurance risk capital to either crowd in or bring more finance, or in some cases to be a complement, maybe even a substitution for finance capital that, again, grows the market. So that innovation. And I think also it's thinking about the firm in total. I'm also seeing a shift from, instead of I'll do everything that I need to do for my team selfishly to grow. That's good. That's what we're all paid to do, is to ensure the success of our teams. But how do I help the firm to grow? How can I make an introduction? How can I think of innovation? How can I do various activities or have strategic initiatives that ultimately the firm grows and we're bringing a total solution to our clients. And from a credit specialties perspective, we're thinking about how do we provide more value to our clients by partnering with, for instance, energy and power, by partnering with construction, by partnering with aviation, by partnering with marine, partnering with Oliver Wyman. So how do we partner across the firm, again, to look at risk in a different way, to complement what we're providing to our clients, ultimately to drive more value to those that need credit specialty solutions? How do we enhance that through our collaborations?
Thank you. So collaboration, innovation, and partnership. What initiatives has Marsh implemented to cultivate the future leaders within the company and also ensure their values, or those values that you're creating, continue to align with the changing world's social needs?
This is one of the most difficult ones of how do you attract, retain, and invest in your colleagues in a very intentional way. Some of the initiatives that we have, Marsh, and in our firm as well, from an innovation perspective, we have rolled out an AI platform. And so we've created an AI track where you can get a badge so you can learn how to use the tool to be more effective in your job and how also to bring more solutions to clients. So that's in a very specific way on technology, but that's an area where insurance, the market is changing. And so we need to stay ahead of that. We also have development programs for leaders. So we have leadership development programs. I was fortunate enough in my career at Marsh, I've gone through, I think, 3 of them, 3 or 4, and that's been very helpful in expanding my network within Marsh and helping me develop skills with negotiation, with leadership, with goal setting, what makes leadership work. So we invest there, but ultimately a colleague's experience and a leader's experience is a very person-to-person exchange. And so I think having very motivated, engaged, and those leaders that just feel excited about the business and very passionate about what you do and passionate about the industry, that helps cultivate the future leaders of the future because they see, wow, this is someone that loves showing up to work every day. They're passionate about what they do. I want to be like that one day. And so I think it's hard to teach passion. It's helping guide colleagues to where they could be so that they can feel that passion. But I think that that's a soft skill and a soft benefit that is not necessarily teachable, but is definitely cultivatable, if that's a word.
I'm not sure. But it can't be a podcast about future-proofing credit specialties if we don't mention AI. Angela, I have a difficult question for you because we're talking about future-proofing and future leadership. So what message would you like to give to Marsh's CEO? So you currently have John Doyle, not now though, in 2050. So for someone who's just perhaps beginning their career now or excelling in their career rather, but will grow into that kind of leadership role, what messages would you like to deliver to that future CEO?
I'm lucky that I'm probably interacting with the future CEO at this point in time, but I don't know who it is at this point. A few pieces of advice. One is don't lose the passion for what we do and the value that we provide. A couple of years ago, I launched a young professionals program. We called it the Fellowship, and I had the opportunity to interact with 25 of our up-and-coming future leaders. And I loved interacting with that group because they brought a fresh perspective. So they asked questions when sometimes as a leader, you may not query why we did this because we've always done it this way in the past. And I loved that fresh perspective. And I found myself sometimes mid-sentence saying, well, this is how we've always done it because... And then I find myself pausing because I wasn't sure why we did that. Or maybe the environment had changed and the circumstances that existed didn't exist now. So why were we doing new things the old way? So I loved that fresh perspective. So I would say keep that. Always challenge yourself. I would also say be better. That's one of the taglines that I have. You're supposed to have a tagline as a leader and put it on your profile. I don't put be better. I think that can be overwhelming for people, but I'm always thinking, how can I be better? How can I improve? How can my team be better? How can our firm be better? And I think that constant improvement and always looking for ways to be better, I wouldn't lose that either. Right now, the leader of the future is sitting in the firm and making a decision. So think about what's the impact of the decision you're making and be thinking for the long term. I had someone who mentioned that to me, that his frustration sometimes with leaders today is they're making a decision for the quarter, they're making a decision for the half year, they're making the decision for the year. To be fair, that's what we're paid to do. We need to show results, but how can we be a bit more thoughtful about the long-term impact of the decisions that we're making? And that's what he said is he feels that his position is to bring that voice that will push the company to be thinking longer term. Two final thoughts on that. I'm a big fan of technology. I'm not the greatest with AI yet, but I've practiced prompting and I've taken various courses internally. I think we need to be open to technology and how technology will change, whether we like it or not. It's coming and it's here and it's beyond what we even think it is. So I would also be experimental with technology, but again, be thoughtful about what the impact is. But I do think that we need to embed that in our process. And I listened to a talk 2 weeks ago where the presenter had said, how do we compete with AI? And most people think of that in the negative of AI will take my job or AI will replace me. But it's how do I think of AI as a companion, as another member of my team, which I thought was thought-provoking in itself. And then finally is when we do think about the social impact, the decisions that you make as a leader do impact people in a community. They impact your colleagues. And so from a social impact perspective, just be thinking about how do you leverage your team more effectively to get the most out of everyone. We're a people business in what we do. Be always thinking that everyone has a role to play and everyone has a role to fill. So how can you bring the best out of them? And then how can you make an impact? I look forward to, in, let's call it 25 years, meeting our next CEO.
Thank you, Angela. So stay close to the passion, be better, think about your impact, embrace technology, and think about your team and community. That was Angela Duca answering the $1 million question of how best to nurture future talent. Angela, thank you very much for joining us here in London on Trade Finance Talks.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.